I'm going to spotlight myself for just a moment so I can kick this off. My name is Kathy Jones, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Alabama. And every month, most every month, we have voter skills training, and we're starting to really focus on getting ready for the municipal elections that are happening this summer. And one of the things, it helps all of us to get more information about the law, as well as trying to get ready to support things related to candidate forums. And then for those of you who, the municipalities that you live in, we need to really get people focused on, knowing that there's an election coming up. And so this third topic we'll talk today, Roger has been pulling together with his team the list of all the municipalities that we can find right now. This list is ongoing because there's over 472 municipal elections that are happening in August. So that's kind of an amazing number. So we're going to start this off with a real focus on Alabama election law. And this is something that, is kind of dry, but we think it's actually pretty exciting stuff. But we hope you agree. But for right now, I'm gonna hand it off to Brian and let him carry it from here.
All right, thanks, Kathy, and I appreciate the opportunity to present today. And Kathy, you're working on pulling up my slides, right?
Yeah, just one moment. I'm pulling them up.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started anyway. When the slides get up, you'll see my email address is on there. Again, if anyone has any questions, or probably more importantly to me, if you have any suggestions about the presentation, emailing me is probably the best way to get a hold of me. There's lots of times I can't answer a phone, so it's easier if you email me. I'll be glad to call you back or something. Just a little bit got me into this background. In 2018 was the first time I was a poll worker. And I went to the training, and in Limestone County, the poll worker training is about an hour. And I don't remember a whole lot about the training, but I remember them saying there were 5 things not to do. And since it was my first time, we had co-inspectors at my polling location, and the inspector said, well, would you mind working this one lady? She wasn't at training today, but she's been doing this for like 10 years, so she knows what she's doing. And at the time, Limestone County didn't have the poll pad, so she was doing the book and marking people off the list, and I was doing the book, making sure people signed on the right line and stuff. So I was doing that. And this lady, in the first 5 minutes, I think she did 3 of the 5 things they told us absolutely not to do. And it took her a couple hours to do the other 2 things. So it made me think, well, gee, I think I got to go back and look at election laws and figure out so I understand this better. And sure enough, I mean, what she had done are things you're not supposed to do. And it's something poll pads has corrected most of it. So anyway, that's kind of got me into looking at election laws real close. Next slide, Kathy. This is kind of what I'm hoping to cover today. The first thing is going to be real quick. I'm just going to show you the website where you can find the Alabama Constitution, the Code of Alabama, and the Administrative Code, where you can have access to all these things. And I'm going to go through the 3 main things: the Constitution, the Code of Alabama, and the Administrative Code, and kind of just touch base on how it's organized, some of the areas that I spend a lot of time with, and kind of so you can look where there. I tend to get into the weeds on this stuff a lot, and Kathy's going to keep me out of doing that because I could take 2 hours or more on this, and we don't want to do that. So I'll try to stay at a high enough level where we don't get into too much detail. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Alabama election guide and the Secretary of State website and some resources there. Next slide, please.
Brian, can you see that?
And again, this is, it can see it. So I'm assuming if I'm seeing it, other people are seeing it. But on this, I say this is one level down from the main Alabama Ledger page. It's a place where you can see it talks about seeing the Alabama Constitution, the Code of Alabama, Administrative Code. So all three are right there. You can click on any of those three, the Alabama Constitution, the Code of Alabama, or the Administrative Code, and that the code will pop up. So, and at the end of this, I've got about 7 or 8 links, and this is one of them that shows you when you get the presentation, you'll just be able to click right on the link and go here, hopefully, if it works. Next slide, please. All right, the Alabama Constitution. I find it kind of funny. The Alabama Constitution, which we've been told many times, is the longest document like it in the world. When it comes to elections, you see the entire thing on elections, and I'm talking about general elections. There's lots of times we refer to elections like for specific counties, they want to pass a tax increase. That you have to do it by election. It takes an election or whatever, but the election requirements are on this one page. It's Article 8, Section 177 of the Alabama Constitution. And it spells out a lot of the basic requirements. First of all, you have to be at least 18 years of age. You have to be a resident of Alabama. You have to be registered in accordance with the Code of Alabama, and then not being convicted of a crime of moral turpitude and not been declared mentally incompetent. So that's basically the stuff that's on the Alabama registration form. I do find it interesting that it says the legislature should set a residency requirement for before you can register. But the only one I know of is the one on the registration form where it says you have to be registered at least 14 days before the election. So I'm assuming that's the requirement in Alabama. I know I'm originally from Massachusetts, and they had a much longer, I think it was 60 days you had to be in the state before you could register to vote. And then the legislature, the bottom line, it says specifically that the legislature shall address certain things. It talks about registration requirements, absentee voting requirements, and who can vote absentee, and then the procedures. It makes a big issue about secrecy in voting, but that's something that's not included in the code in a few places. The administrative code about how to conduct elections and how candidates are nominated. So that's what's covered in the Alabama Constitution, and it's pretty basic. Next slide, please. And then when you get the Code of Alabama, it's Title 17 is where they cover elections. There's 17 chapters, and they seem to almost use chapters and sections interchangeably on the titles. They call them chapters, but when they refer to the actual code, it's sections. But there's 17 different chapters when it comes to elections in the Alabama Code. The ones I've put in bold here, the ones I'm going to talk about, and they tie back to the Constitution. These are the sections that the Constitution says the legislature should address. Most of them are pretty straightforward, like voter registration. It's just the election administration one. Actually, probably could highlight the whole thing, but I chose the election preparation side. Chapter 6, Chapter 9 on the conduct and management of elections. And then the primary, Chapter 13 and 14 actually get into some of the specifics about how to conduct elections. So we can cover those two. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to start. Registration voters, Section 17.3 is basically got this section. It has 3 articles in it. One of them covers the Board of Registrars, which talks about the Board of Registrars and what it takes, what the Board of Registrars does, what you have to do to meet the qualification of the registrars. And this one's an interesting one because most of this has been revised in 2025. So they already have it online in there, but there's different, they've kind of updated some of that stuff. Next, Article 2 is the qualification of electors, and basically what are the basic who can be an elector in Alabama, and then Article 3 talks about how they get registered. I'm going to talk here about 2 specific sections. Article 2 talks about the crimes of moral turpitude. That's 17-3-30.1. And again, people that do a lot of voter registration for League of Women Voters, you'll hear us talk a lot about it. But again, there is the current list of crimes of moral turpitude, including the ones they put in the last legislative session. So you can find those in there. And the other one is 17.350 is the voting registration deadline. And that basically says prohibits any person from registering within 14 days before an election. Again, that's the only specific registry requirement I've been able to find. Next slide, please. This is section 17.6. It talks about election preparation, and it really covers two of the things that are calling out of the Constitution. It talks a little bit about secrecy at a very high level in administration election. Again, there are three articles. Again, one talks about the establishment of precincts, and that's basically a county commission responsibility. It talks in great detail about what the ballot's supposed to look like, and it talks about the Alabama Informed Voter Act. There's two things in there I'm going to talk about. One is that section 17.626C is talks about the secrecy envelopes, and all it says is secrecy envelopes shall be provided to transport your ballot from where you mark it to the tabulating machine. Again, just very high level. It says you have a right to vote, cast a secret ballot. Doesn't have a lot of details. And in that 17.634, again, it talks about every voter shall have the right to vote a secret ballot. So it's clearly in the code, but it doesn't say how that is done and what happens if they don't do it, etc. Next slide, Kathy. Chapter 9 has to do with the conduct and management of elections. This is really where you get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details of how a polling location is run on election day. Again, Article 1 talks about general provisions. Article 2 gets into voter identification. Article 3 is prohibited practices. And on this one, again, there's a lot of specifics that you might want to get into, go refer to look at when you're helping voters or just for research purposes. And it's interesting, 17-9-3 in this section is where they have the independent candidate procedures to get on the general election in November. Basically, you have to get a certain number of signatures, and it's based on the last gubernatorial election. And you can do that either by county, by precinct, or statewide, but you have to get, again, a certain number of signatures. And that has to be done before 5 p.m. on the primary election day. It was interesting. The last election, I had a couple people that were interested in running, but it was after the primary, and they said, "Isn't there some way we can get on the ballot as independents?" I said, "No, that deadline is passed. It's actually the day that all the parties nominate their candidates, unless there's a runoff, is also the day for any independents to get on the candidate." 17.9-6 is the specific one that tells you that elections are held from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on election day. 17.9-10 is an important one you run into a lot as an inspector, and that's the one that says the elector must vote in the county and voting location of domicile. So that's one where someone's moved, haven't updated their voting record. No, you have to vote where your new voting location is. You'll end up doing a provisional ballot. And if you move to a different county, you're basically out of luck. 17-9-14, I just want to touch on that's where they talked about spoiled ballots, which again, if you make a mistake on your ballot, you have the right to turn that ballot in and get a new ballot. And you can do that up to the time you put the ballot into the tabulator. You actually have that right on absentee ballots up to the point you mail it back, or you give it back if you're doing it in person, to the AEM, but they don't really tell you that. So if you get a ballot, you're voting absentee, you make a mistake, the best thing to do is contact the AEM and get a new ballot. And again, of course, one is 17.9-30 is the identification of electors, and that's basically the Alabama photo identification card. That goes into the list of all the valid IDs to be able to vote, how to get a voter ID if you don't have one of the other IDs. Next slide, Kathy. Absentee voting section, and again, I'm big on absentee voting and promoting it, and generally like the league is, there's some changes we'd like to see made to this. We're trying to push, and some we'd like to see changes they made to do away with. But the absentee voting section is 1711. I'm not going to get into much today because I think we've talked about it in the past. Article 1 is the general provisions for absentee voting, and then Article 2 talks about overseas absentee voting, because there's a lot of federal law that lets you do things that Alabama law prohibits. So they've kind of separated it out. If you're voting here, regular absentee voting, you're under Article 1. If you're overseas, you'd be on Article 2. 1711-12, where it talks about the availability of absentee ballots. For primary and general elections, basically they have to be available 55 days before election, which these days you're going to vote absentee. You need to take advantage of that time because of the way the mail is. The problem where you run into issues in the runoff primary election, they have up to 14 days after the primary election to get those ballots prepared. And the math, when they changed the primary um, a couple of years ago to be 6 weeks after the general election, you're already at 42 days. So you've already lost 13 days. You're absentee voting. Now you take another 14 days off of that, and voting in a primary runoff election is very hard. You have to get on it as soon as the ballots are available, or you're going to run out of time. And then in municipal elections, um, it's even worse. You're not required to have the ballots available until in only 28 days before the election. So it's even tougher to vote absentee in a municipal election. And then 1711-18 is the time requirements for returning of absentee ballots. Next slide, Kathy. And this is the thing for primary elections. And I included this because it has a lot of procedures in it, but also, again, is where the nominating process for parties is included. Again, there's four articles in this: the general provisions, the political parties, the contest of primary elections, and the presidential preference primaries elections. And I'm not going to totally ignore number 4 because it's very confusing because the rules in there. But then basically each party is allowed to develop their own rules for this. So it's hard to cover that without getting into a lot of detail. Um, but a couple important things here, 1713.5 is candidates must declare their candidacy 116 days before the primary is when they have to have their paperwork. That's to the state party, that whichever party they're running as. The party has till 80 Tuesday before the primary to give the Secretary of State, if it's a state or federal office. If it's a county office, it goes to the judge of probate to get the names are. But there is something in there. Um, you have like another 11 days after those 82 days. If someone doesn't want to run, or someone for some reason has been disqualified, you can notify the Secretary of State, but your name will remain on the ballot. And then again, in 1713.10, it just has a statement: the ballot of every voter shall be kept secret and is inviolate, but doesn't tell you how to do that. Next slide. For general elections, there's really, again, that is chapter 14. Again, you get general provisions. Again, election of presidential and vice presidential electors, which gets very complicated. I'm not going to do that. And there's a section that talks about amendments, and there's a section that talks about congressional districts and elections. And Article 1, and the biggest thing I think they do in there is they tell you which particular offices are going to be on the ballot in which years. And that's spelled out in Article 1. And in Article 4, it's interesting. The way I read that, I think they've left language in there because of the Milligan case. And I assume there's still ongoing activity with the Milligan case. And I think the argument of the Secretary of State's office is the Milligan case does not meet the criteria that's in the Code of Alabama for setting up the districts. So I think they've left that out of date, and it hasn't been updated to reflect what the mandated congressional districts were that we used in 2024. Next slide, Kathy. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about. The code. I want to talk about the Code of Alabama, the Alabama Administrative Code. And I've put a little bit extra in here because, to be honest, I didn't even know exactly what the code was, how it was. There's a good paper by the LSA that I used to go. Basically, in 1981, the Alabama Administrative Procedures Act was enacted. It establishes the minimum procedures by which any government agency of the state may adopt administrative procedures. It established a uniform process to be used. They want to provide notice of these procedures, promote fairness, and then have input from the public in the rulemaking process. So they're really trying to increase public participation. The Legislative Services Agency is in charge of compiling all those procedures, maintaining them, and maintain the Alabama Administrative Code, and they have a website with all this on here. LSA coordinates the filing process, provides administrative assistance to the legislature, and one of the things they do in the legislative oversight process to make sure is that the administrative procedures are not overstepping what the law calls for, and then make sure all the rules are complete. And there's the rule. I'm not going to read this to you, but it's basically tells you it's basically the procedures, interpretation and stuff of the agencies, how they implement the law. If you go back and look at the chapter on elections, there's numerous times in there it says the Secretary of State's office shall put out procedures or policies how they're going to do this. They are supposed to do this in accordance with this procedure. Next slide. When you look at the administrative code, they do it by agency. There's really only two agencies that have information that deals with elections. Agency 820 is the Secretary of State's office. Obviously, they have a big portion. They have a section that talks about implementation of the Help America Vote Act. That basically talks about, it's mostly to help states vote. It deals with getting equipment and a little bit of polling place locations if you try and do improvements there, and it has the procedures in there, how to get that money. It talks about voter registration. It talks about absentee voting, and both of those are very similar to what's actually in the law. It talks about the ballot access for political parties and independent candidates, how to file if you go to vote and you have a complaint about the Help America Vote Act. It tells you how to do that. It has procedures for visual voting, and then it also talks about the procedures for crossover voting. So all those procedures are in the administrative code. They most of them repeat the law, but then give you more specifics about how to do certain parts of those procedures. And then the state of Alabama Electronic Voting Committee has their own chapter in there, and it talks mostly about the tabulators. It doesn't talk about poll pads, but it talks about the procedures to use when you're opening polls, when you're counting ballots and stuff. Those procedures are covered in that agency 307, the Electronic Voting Committee. Next slide, please. The Alabama election guide, I want to kind of push this one a little bit. When I've talked to the probate judge or other election officials, they keep referring to that. It's published by the Alabama Law Institute, which is run by the Legislative Services Agency, but in close coordination with the University of Alabama. It's not official, but it seems to be very accurate and up to date. And it addresses, if you all those subjects I just talked about, from the Constitution, the Alabama Code, and the Administrative Code, it addresses all that. It's the 23-24 version is 644 pages, and you can download it. So I would suggest people download the old copy now. And what it's trying to do is explain the law in plain everyday language. So it's good, but it usually gives you what the law says, and then kind of what the intent of that's supposed to be. Again, it's used by a lot of election officials. And my plan is when they get the 25-26 one out, whenever that is, I'll probably order a hard copy to try to get a very good source. Next slide, please. The Secretary of State website, they have some guides on there. These are guides I use. They got a voter guide. They got the election administration calendar, which is very specific about what dates, when things have to be done. They have a poll worker guide, an absentee election manager guide, the voter ID guide, and a provisional ballot guide. My caution on this is when they update these, they don't update them as precisely as they do like the election manual. And you will go back, and Roger, I can't remember which one, but Roger in one of these presentations had some information, asked him where he got it, and it came out of the voter's guide, and he went back. It was not up to date, didn't have current information. So my advice on these guides, you can use them. They're good for quick references, but if you're working on an issue that you have to be absolutely current, up to date, I'd go back either to the election guide or probably to the actual Alabama code or administrative code that's online. Next slide, please, Kathy. This is just the main page, and hopefully everyone's familiar with this, but if you look in the left-hand corner, I probably have it up front, where it's got the drop down, they have the Alabama Constitution, Administrative Code, and the Code of Alabama. Those are links you can get to everything else. but everyone I hopefully is familiar with this. If you're involved and want to see what bills are being discussed right now, you have the bill search and it's information about your House of Representatives, Senate, and Legislative Service Agency. So it's a good resource. And again, Kathy, I think I got one more slide. And these are the useful links. So again, that Alabama, the first one is the top level where it has the Senate and all that. The second one goes straight to where you have the codes. I've got the Secretary of State on there. And then the Secretary of State, where you can go to get those guides I talked about. Now, right now, you can get all those guides. The 24 ones are still online. So you want to see what those guides say, you have to go back. When you click on that link, instead of the 2026 one, you have to go to 2024. At some point, they will update and put all those guides on for the 26 elections. And again, the LSA website, that's got the Alabama election handbook on there. It also has a bunch of other good handbooks on there. It's got it tells you how like the county commissioner is supposed to how to function, how the legislature functions. So that's another good resource. I apologize. I went through this pretty quick, but I'll take any questions. If not, we'll move on to the next topic.
I have a question.
Go
on
ahead.
The phone.
Who's, if you'll identify yourself and then I'm looking.
Dr. Elaine Harrington, Tuskegee.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if you would speak about absentee voting as applies to nursing home centers. Are they eligible to vote too? People
Kathy,
who are confined to nursing facilities.
I'm going to pass that to Kathy because I want to make sure I'm 100% in sequence with what the legal women voters are doing, because everyone I think knows there was the assistance bill that was passed the last thing. So Kathy, do you mind addressing that one?
No, I don't. I'm good. So I guess first of all, I will say that we did have a lawsuit. Let me turn the spotlight off just a second. I'll put you back in the with the rest of us. But last year we had a lawsuit, and we still got a lawsuit. It's called SB1. It's the one that was criminalizing aspects of helping people with absentee ballot applications. And so your question is really important because we did get a stay from the federal court last fall that allowed us to provide people who meet the criteria of the Voting Rights Act, Section 208. And so that includes people who are disabled, blind, functionally illiterate. And so that includes people who are, living in assisted living and nursing homes that we can assist them with absentee ballots, people who are residents there. And so there's no, and not just the league, but anyone they are people who live in a nursing home or an assisted living or a group home. If they ask for help, then they would not be there if they didn't need to be there.
Right.
So they would be able to get help with absentee ballot applications, as well as, now, one thing I will say, there is right now there's a problem in this state where the law does not allow anyone to hand deliver someone's absentee ballot application or absentee ballot. And that's a bill that we've been really pushing, that Representative Clark has got in the system right now, which would allow a person with a disability to designate someone to turn in their absentee ballot application or their ballot. And right now we have been pushing on that as hard as we can. And right now they're not willing to consider it. And so that's unfortunate. But
so do they have to be mailed now?
Yes. Unless they can go down and deliver it themselves, then it would have to be mailed.
If they could go and deliver it themselves, they could probably go and vote.
Exactly. That's the problem. That's the problem. Because yeah, I was going to say it costs money that could be used for something else. Yeah. So, but I guess the good news is that we did get permission so that we could help people who are disabled or basically if they meet the criteria of the Voting Rights Act, Section 208.
Fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and
And that
that was a
injunction,
great,
I was going to say that injunction is still in place. We're all still able to operate under that.
okay. That was a great question. I want to make sure because absentee voting, the ballot curing, and the assistance bills are ones that are league priorities here. So I want to let Kathy answer it since she's the most up to date on that.
Okay.
I was going to say this has been a fairly dry topic, but I will say that it's a very important topic. And for many reasons. One of them is if you're out there doing voter registration and you're helping people, you need to understand the basis of all the forms that we're asked to fill out and also the different deadlines that are set. Everything is in the law. And so that's how we are able to do what we do and not get crossways with the Secretary of State or any of the election officials. The other thing is when we're doing advocacy, understanding this law is the current state of the law and then going in and analyzing what the proposed bills are really helps us find where people, and not just in voting, but this we're focused on voting, but the law is sort of like that's the heart of it, and then the bills are written to modify the existing law, sometimes to add brand new law, but typically with the voting laws, they're going in and modifying existing law. So it's good. I felt like I asked Brian, since he is very much involved in all aspects of poll working and precinct captain and help working with us on the league. I felt like this was really an important thing for all of us to get exposed to, because now you know where to go look, and you'll get the link so you can go dig in and get more familiar with it.
Kathy, can I have 30 seconds more? Because you just
Yes.
touched on another subject.
Yeah.
I haven't done an exhaustive study, but I know like here in Limestone County, inspectors get about 2 hours of training before an election. Poll workers get about an hour. I know last year we met with Judge Barger in Madison County. I think they got a full day. And I guess I'm saying that poll workers, inspectors make mistakes. So kind of know your stuff and don't think just because a poll worker or an inspector tells you something, be respectful, but you can challenge it if you know they're wrong because they do make mistakes.
And putting that out, when he says that, I also will throw out there, and we'll have a session on this later again, but 866 our vote is if you have a problem at the polling place, then they can also help you, and they're going back and looking at the law as well. So anyway, this is where it all starts. I think the next topic we had was Pam Caruso is going to talk about candidate forums. And so Pam, you share your screen.
Okay, there we go. All right. Here we go, Kathy. I've been working candidate forums for several years. I've done them in Huntsville and also in Madison City. And we've also done a state one for the Secretary of State this last time, 3 years ago. So just want to talk quickly about how this works, but somehow I don't think I'm on the right. There we are. All right. So why we need candidate forums? We have low turnout for these municipal elections. A lot of them are less than 10%. So, and as candidates have a hard time reaching their voters. And so this is an opportunity to both educate the voting public on who is running for office and what they want to accomplish. And it also is an opportunity for the candidates to reach the voting public to address the issues that are important to them, and also to hear from the public what the public wants to hear. So too often, I know in Huntsville, candidate forums are held by very small groups of people. Like a neighborhood association will hold a candidate forum, but that doesn't mean they invite everybody. It could be hosted by somebody that knows one of the candidates. So we really feel like there needs to be an opportunity for all the candidates running for an office to be together on a platform to get asked questions by the public and to have a debate or a discussion in following some good rules of conduct, being nice to each other. What a concept. Reminder also to the voters on why local politics are so important. It astounds me that so few people show up to vote for their city council and their board of education. And then they're all riled up when something happens, but they never even, most of them don't know what the city council does. This is also an opportunity to create some media attention to get more voters to vote. We suggest you have candidate forums week or two out of the election. People aren't paying attention. And the other thing in Alabama, a lot of our municipal elections are in August, which is kind of a bad time. People are going back to school. It just gets very active. It's like one more thing to worry about. So just from a standpoint of how to have one, I think, Kathy, what was it? There's over 200 candidate for, 200 municipal elections this year.
Over 400.
Yeah. So we'd like to see, groups get together and plan a forum for your community, because you know your community better than anybody else. You'll know where to have one where people are going to feel comfortable. So how you would do one of these is determine the dates for the elections. That's pretty easy to find out. And about 3 months before the election, you need to schedule the forum. Try to get a place to have it, publicize the forum, start handling your logistics, like who's going to do what, all that kind of stuff. And also decide which organizations will be involved and their roles and responsibilities. And this can be a tricky one. You need to be, all of you have got to be on the same page on how you want to hold a candidate forum. What we won't do, the league won't hold one where it's only one person speaking. Other organizations are fine with that, but the league really does have strong rules against that. After the last qualifying day, you need to check with your city clerk or the Secretary of State and get the information on who is running. You'll find out their emails, you'll find out phone numbers that way, and you need to call them and send an email invite to them. And about a month before, you got to select your timekeeper, get your forum questions committee together. You need a script, you need to establish your ground rules, and you need to get a moderator. And then share, I think a good plan is to share your ground rules with the candidates. Let them know what to expect. And you work with your moderator to ensure they understand the ground rules also. And it's just a piece of, some little training there that needs to happen. It doesn't have to be extremely detailed, but it does need to happen. And then you need a release to all the local reporters and news stations as much as you can to try to get people to show up for your forum. The do's and don'ts. Do invite all the candidates, and you can decide, like if you have multiple races going on, maybe you only want city council district this one, and you'll have a candidate forum for them, and then you'll have a candidate forum from District 2. If you've got enough people running that, you may want to do that, but we have held them, I know, in Huntsville for 3 different districts running at the same time. And it worked out okay. But you do need to invite all the candidates. You need to be careful that you have more than one candidate. If you decide to have an event for just one candidate, it just can look, as if a partisan, or it can look as you are supporting that candidate. So we would really suggest you not do that. Announce at the start of your event that all candidates were invited. You want to make sure that if they're not there, they don't get to speak, but it speaks volumes that they aren't there. It's not recommended that substitutes stand in for a candidate. I've had this happen where they want to know if they can send their campaign manager to speak. And I would suggest you don't do that. They may be great at public speaking, but they are not going to be held accountable as an elected official. So you really want to hear from the person that's running for the office. you got to really follow up on your training with your moderator and how you're going to handle any follow-up questions. If somebody answers a question and the next candidate answers the question and it creates a, well, what do you mean? You need to have a moderator that can handle that with good grace and not in a way that it's fair to everyone. Um, Again, carefully select other organizations that you work with. And very much you need to understand who's doing what and what the rules are. Uh, make sure they understand that if you're co-hosting a candidate forum, you can't have their people, posting a picture with one of the candidates saying, hey, we really like this guy. I mean, it's stuff like that you just got to be careful about. You screen all questions from the audience. I can't say this, can't pound my foot hard enough on this one. Um, a lot of times you'll find that there'll be somebody in that audience that wants to ask a question to embarrass one specific candidate. And I don't think that's a fair way to do that. You need to screen those questions. You need to make sure that they're fitting for all the candidates. This isn't, you want these forums to be informational. You want them to talk about what's important and not get into some silly little thing that doesn't add anything but just creates a little media storm. Again, do not on any personal social media discuss candidates or appear to support a candidate. That can just really hurt the way people see you as a fair organization that values the candidates and wants to provide this support to them. You should, in your questions for a forum, really should only ask questions that are pertinent to the office. Do not ask questions designed to embarrass a candidate or one just for one candidate. Here's some example of questions for the candidates, and I would suggest that they receive a copy of potential questions. That doesn't mean these are the questions you're going to ask, but these gives them a feeling, for the candidates a feeling of what will be expected of them as a candidate at your event. For the community ones, I think, what do they think is the biggest problem facing their community? And what do they think they can achieve? This is really a good one. You find out pretty quick how well they know what their job really is or what that job can do. And what do you think is the best thing about your community and how can you make it better? How do you think working better with whatever would affect the community? That could be easily like working better with another city or working better with another district or working better but with another organization such as the Board of Education. And why do you think you're the best candidate for this position? These are to me are basic questions any candidate ought to have and be able to speak about and want to talk about. They want to know that people are listening to them, and they normally want to show why they're different. I'd have some written guidelines for candidate forums or debates, and I'll be glad to share those. The focus on this is information that you hand out in advance to the candidates. It'll give them information on how long the event's going to be, who the moderator will be, so they can go look at if it's a moderator like a news person or anything like that, they can look at them. Along with how long they're going to have to speak, to introduce themselves, to answer questions and make closing statements. And that the questions will be for all the candidates. There's not going to be specific questions for specific candidates. Public questions would be screened in advance. It's just some of the guidelines. And we ask that the candidates sign these guidelines in advance of the debate. basically as an acknowledgement that they read the guidelines and they agreed to the ground rules, so that hopefully it can prevent any cause for disturbances if something doesn't happen exactly like they expect it to. But we have this written out in a form, and we get the candidates to sign that and hand it back to us before the forum. So that is the end of my little slideshow. Does anybody have any questions?
We did have a comment that was talking about, can you read the chat? Kim, do you want to make that question, or?
Yeah, so I thought the league policy was that we do not provide questions ahead
Of time.
No, I looked that up, and that is not part of the policy. I think that's probably just how somebody has, has an organization does stuff. And I'm not saying I would hand out all the questions, but I would give them kind of here's kind of the questions you'll be asked, so that they have an expectation. Because it's important that they feel comfortable that when they come to a candidate forum hosted, that they know that they're all going to be treated equally, and this is and fairly, and why we're doing it. And these are the kind of questions we're going to ask. We're going to ask questions. We're not going to, don't ask questions about the presidential election to a city council member. Things like that. So that's why I suggest you do hand out some questions, so that they have a feeling for what's going to be asked of them.
All right, any other questions? Oh, guides and format of a candidate forum. So I think this was our effort to try to give you some guidelines. Do you want to address this any further, Pam?
And it's pretty specific. I have it written out for guidelines that we have given for the candidates to sign. And I'll be glad I'll give that to Kathy along with the charts so she can send it out. Is that okay, Kathy?
Yeah, and just also, I do want to say to everybody that the League of Women Voters, we have 9 leagues across the state, as well as the state league. And we'll be doing candidate forums, or the local leagues are going to be focusing on in their regions, for especially this summer for the municipal and next year for the others. And so they will all be looking for, other nonpartisan groups to work with to, to do candidate forums. So if people on this call are interested, then talk to them and see, because I think, the main thing is we do have to be strictly nonpartisan, and that is to me the biggest challenge, is to make sure we're all, that it works out. But you know what, it's a really great opportunity to work together, and that's what we all need to do, is find ways to collaborate. And what Pam, and then we've got some others on this call that are also very experienced in doing candidate forums, and every small town, there's 470 elections this summer. It would be really nice to do these across the state, because people need to be starting to pay attention to what's happening in their communities.
Dr. Harrington again, can you hear me?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I understand if the organization prepares questions that they could be submitted to the candidates. But if you have questions from the audience, do you recommend that they write their question and then zip it to a screening team of the organization and screen the questions out? Because sometimes when people in the audience get up to ask questions, they do dissertations. They talk about other things before they even ask a question. In other words, do you recommend the audience writing their questions and presenting those questions to a screening team, so that the screening team knows what is going to be asked?
Exactly. Otherwise, they could ask questions that are, totally have nothing
Irrelevant,
to the
yeah.
position. Yeah, and we would have a screening team that would look at those questions. We ask them to
Uh-huh,
write them down, put them on cards, and we can have people walking around and picking up those cards. And
right,
and we don't want to think that we're the only ones that know the right questions. We do want questions
right,
from the audience, but we don't want it to be offensive.
right.
And you're correct. Some people get up and they tell a dissertation about themselves, and then they finally get around to
Uh-huh.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was going to add one thing. This month we're talking about how to do candidate forums, basics 101. But, in the near future, I want us to do another discussion on, civility, in these community elections, because, you know, the fact that someone is willing to step up and run for office, you may not agree with them, but you got to respect the fact that they're willing to get in there and run for office. You've got to, I think part of the problem that we've all seen recently is, the community gets, the country is polarized, and you find sometimes that people who are really strong and passionate about their candidate will be rude and mean to the community that's supporting the other candidate. And we've all got to basically try to bring to, dial down that tension, because nobody is going to want to run for office if they think that they're going to be have their reputation and all of their friends lose their friends if they run for office. And so, especially when we're looking at these municipal elections, which we really, really, really need people running for office, um, it would be good for all of us to be thinking about how can we make this more civil, you know? And that, so it's like how to run a candidate forum in a way that's civil. How do we tone down the rhetoric and consciously tone down the rhetoric so that our communities are talking about the issues and not talking about what someone did, that was, if someone did something illegal or something, that ought to come out somewhere else besides people tearing each other down. But anyway, thank you, Pam. This is important, and we'll put this out there along with the recording of this entire meeting today.
Yeah, we have another question. Are you planning on doing a session on getting the voters out to vote?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That's a hard one.
Yeah. That's that, you know what, and that's a really good question, because I think going in and telling someone to vote who doesn't show up and voting to vote is not going to change their mind and get them off the couch and to the ballot box. But if we can figure out how to crack the code, talking about the issues that people care about, and also just making people understand that we're not going to have the perfect answer. We're just trying to move the ball forward. So we're going to have a session. We'll plan for that sometime, looking probably around early June, sometime in June, to really focus on how do we get people to actually engage and show up and understand why it's so important to vote. Thank you. Thank you for that question, James. All right, we're going to shift gears now. And Roger, this one is yours. So go for it.
Okay,
All right.
everybody.
Yeah, we can see that.
Can
You
you
might
hear
want
me?
to tell them. You might want to tell them what this is.
Okay. Can you hear me? Wait a minute.
Yes.
Okay. What this
Can you make
is,
it a little bigger? Can you make it a little bigger, please? Just a little bit.
let's see. Wait a minute.
I'm a little visually challenged a little bit.
Roger, I think if you expand it to where maybe you don't show the whole screen, just the part to the left, it might be the most important part.
Yeah, let me
I can share it if you want me to, and then you can tell me.
Okay, I'm good. I figured out how to do it on my side. I'm good.
Okay.
So what this is an attempt to look up all the elections were happening in each county in Alabama. There's 67 counties. It was like 470 elections. So what I did, I looked up all the cities, uh, towns, and everything to find the city clerk, the phone numbers, and if they have a website that pertains to election. And let's talk with Antigua here. You know, they had all their numbers and everything, had their city clerks and their numbers and their websites. But as you go through this, you start seeing all of a sudden there's no websites. And this is what's the problem is with this. Well, with this too, you know, I'll have everything filled in. But like say, like Bibb County, you can find a person, you can find a number in the website, but you can't find all of them that don't have a website to show there's an election coming up, even though there is one coming up. But say like Calhoun County, we decided, okay, we're going to pick 50 of the counties here for 411. And so I spent my time looking that up, the city clerk and phone numbers, and if they had a website to show what actions they would take for their elections. And you can see some of these didn't exactly, I couldn't find some of these on the internet. Some of them you can, you know, you go through and all of a sudden there's Colbert County, they have everything. They have their election managers, they have their cities and their numbers and their websites. But then you go to, you know, another county, they don't have anything. So this is what I've been doing the last couple of months, is trying to get this filled in, to get this so you can see what municipal elections are and who the phone number is and who you contact. It's usually the city clerk, because they're the ones who conduct the elections. So this is, you know, and we come to Houston County. Well, they mostly had all their elections on there. They had their people on there, the city clerks on there. You know, then they come to Jackson County, the same thing. It's funny how it goes from one to the other with all of this. This is all you see. These are for a 411. But this is how, I haven't looked all of them up, but this is how you find all of this. So does anybody have any questions on it? Nobody has any questions?
I want to take it off of share for just a minute and let's talk about just a moment so we can see if folks have their hands up, because I can't tell. So I was just going to add for folks who might be wondering what this spreadsheet is for is, you know, when they say there's 470 something elections across Alabama, you go to the Secretary of State's website and there is no list of municipalities. And so as we started trying to figure out how do we engage and get out the vote, suddenly you start realizing that there's nowhere in Alabama where people are pulling all this information into one place. And so that's when Roger was pulling this spreadsheet together and trying to identify where, you know, if you wanted to call up and find out where in Rogersville how to go run for office, who would you call? And so that link that he's got there would be the first number that you would call just to ask. And also if you're a voter trying to find out what's your schedule, where can you find information, then that's what this link is for. And and knowledge is power. And it's like, if you don't know where to, if you don't even know where to go to start thinking about running for office and finding out how to qualify, then it really kind of holds you back. And so this is this information on that spreadsheet is, it's going to be something we're going to release all of this so that people can go out there and find their town. But we're also using it to help us plan. You saw all those little pink highlights that he had on his slide, that's where we're going to focus our Vote 411 this for the August elections. And so, and also we're going to be really trying to focus the candidate forums as well. So that's it, and we'll be coming out with that list as soon as we can. We're going to be meeting, our voter services committee will be meeting soon to really try to get our arms around how much can we handle, because you know, as you guys know, we're all volunteers, so it's like we can handle what we can handle, but we're trying to really kind of push the limits. And so that's why we're also looking to partner with other organizations too, because you know, this is really going to depend on us to try to get people to actually show up and vote, and make sure people know, you know, if they're interested in running for office, you guys need to help them figure out how to find the right information and actually take that step. And Roger, I want to say thank you for pulling that together, because that is a bear. Jim has a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it'd be possible to post that as a Google document or something like that, where people can look at that and see where some of the holes are, and then some of us are out in the boonies here could possibly help fill in some of those blanks.
Yeah, that'd be fine. We'll pull that onto we have a place on our shared drive. We can pull that, and, you know, so we can, the thing I get nervous about Google Docs, but if you turn on the version history, you can find out if something happens, then you know. But yeah, Jim, that would really help, because we do have trouble in some of these rural areas trying to make that connection. All right. Any other questions? I will say next month, we're going to have a woman from a national organization that's going to talk about running for office. And this is really, we wanted to really start doing what we can to help people understand, you know, we're not partisan, and this group is nonpartisan. And so what we want to do is use this as an opportunity to really encourage all of you to consider running for office. We can't support you if you do run, but we'll be excited to see all these people running, because that's what needs to happen. And then the other topic we're going to talk about next month is disability voting rights. Nikki Watkins, the voting rights director for ADAP, is going to be joining us to talk about what your rights are as a person with a disability, which one of these days will be all of us. So we need to understand the rights and also support those who need accommodation, because that's their right and no one should take it away. All right. Anything else? Thank you all for showing up, and we'll be sending out a recording. Let me hit the stop button.